Nupur Garg is the founder of WinPE. It's a not-for-profit initiative to enhance gender diversity in investing entrepreneurial ecosystem. Nupur used to lead the private equity and venture capital funds business for IFC prior to this. Nupur, I wanted to bring you in on this debate. We've heard from corporates on the supply side on how they think about skilling their workforce. We've also heard from Falgun on the demand side, how they're bringing in a generation of people who can upskill and reskill. From the entrepreneurial ecosystem, how acutely do you see the talent challenge, and what are some of the issues that keep you awake at night as you think about the talent in the entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Thanks, Priyanka. And it's such a pleasure to be here on this panel and talking about this issue, which is so close to all of our hearts. Let's, when we talk about the entrepreneurial ecosystem, I think we need to take a step back and we need to think about the ecosystem that supports the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And let me share a couple of data points with you. So in 2018, a global survey of firms and alternative investments found that women accounted for only 13% of CEOs. In the private equity and venture capital industry, women occupy roughly 7 to 10% of senior roles, depending on the market you're looking at. And roughly 2.3 to 2.5% of the VC funding goes to women-led businesses. And I think it all comes together to say that there is a large gap in having women control or influence capital or capital markets. And you get to see similar data across the financial services sector, right? I mean, even in core banking, when you say that roughly half of the workforce is women, you get up to the top and you sort of say that probably only 10 to 11% of the operational leadership is women. And I think I read somewhere that about 12% of CFOs in large cap financial services firms are women. So, you know, that the funnel really narrows as you go up to the top. And, having women control or influence capital and how capital flows is the philosophy that WinPE really pursues. We believe that when women will have greater influence and control on this, it will really cascade across upwards, downwards, and create a positive change, right? When we work with firms at WinPE, we start to think about how do you really support women as entrepreneurs? The key for them, yes, there are a lot of capacity building initiatives that are required. And I think there are a number of very, very good, high quality programs that are offering this. But it all comes down to saying, what about access to finance? Because ultimately, finance is critical for any business to grow. And research has found that there is a direct correlation between the presence or absence of women in an investor's team with the presence or absence of women in their portfolio. So if you have all made investing teams, the probability that they will back women-led companies and women entrepreneurs is really very, very low. And that then leads into our work with investing firms. That before we can ask you to start thinking about investing in women-led businesses, we need to make sure that you have a team and you have processes that can weed out any kind of unconscious biases. I mean, there are a number of anecdotes, right? People who talk about women entrepreneurs who are asked if they have kids, if they are married, do they have a male co-founder, mansplaining, talking to the male colleague on the table. We've all heard these anecdotes, and it all does end up being correlated with research after all, right? So at the core of what we are doing is we are working with investing firms in thinking about diversity across levels. So firms and their portfolio companies together. So it starts with saying, how do you start building diversity in the firm? The firms that we work with, they've changed a number of things. They've changed how they give out recruitment mandates, how they build a candidate pipeline. They have adopted blind screening tools, and that helps eliminate biases in screening when they're hiring and building their own teams. And this blind screening is something that they're beginning to adopt when it comes to evaluating pipeline companies. How do you build your deal pipeline? So 75% investors hire through networks and invest or source deals through networks. So how do you make that network diverse? And you have to start with making the investors diverse. And that is how you sort of spread the pool and you create greater access to women as entrepreneurs. But clearly there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think we were recently partners with the UN Women's Industry Disruptor Program. And we put out the challenge to the women entrepreneurs in the cohort saying, what exactly do you need for your journey to be successful? And forget about private equity and venture capital, because not every woman entrepreneur is looking at building a unicorn. There are women who are pursuing many different areas of entrepreneurial interest. And it all came down to saying there is no ecosystem that exists. And within that ecosystem, it starts with saying, what is the regulatory environment? What is the ease for women? And the panelists before me spoke about this, about how women at the grassroots level, women sitting at home, and not necessarily women with the perfect qualifications or the perfect experience, but women from all backgrounds today have some brilliant ideas on what they could be doing to solve for the challenges and the gaps that exist. And how do we create an ecosystem where they have access to just people to talk to, mentors to reach out to, right? I mean, advisors. A woman entrepreneur once told me, we don't have a personal board of advisors. So you go to a YPO, all women are partners and spouses. There are really no women who are core members of the YPO, right? So, the challenges are very nuanced and they're sort of multifold. But I think it really comes down for us at Wimpy, because of all my work that I did as an investor, to saying, how do you change how investors are thinking about this? And really how owners of business, how the shareholders, the capital, because diversity, gender diversity is a very top-down agenda. It really has to flow from the top.
Thanks, Nupur, for pointing out some of these very stark statistics, but also some of your personal anecdotes as you interact. I think we've heard, and I know there are some audience questions coming in, and I'll take them just in a couple of minutes. I wanted to bring it all together. We've spoken about obviously the skill gap. We've spoken about the inequity in terms of gender, in terms of socioeconomics. We've spoken about what the corporates are doing. We've spoken about what entrepreneurs like Falgun are doing. I just wanted to go around and ask you all a very, very, it's almost a rapid fire question. So a 30 to 60-second answer. On coming into therefore 22, do you feel optimistic? Do you feel pessimistic, or do you feel kind of neutral about how this might change? And what is your number one thing on the wish list for that to happen? So it's a rapid fire one. So I'd probably like us all, like you all to respond in 60 seconds, and then I'll start taking the questions that are pouring in. Maybe I'll start with you, Anuradha. How do you feel coming into 22?
Look, I feel very optimistic, even though we started the year with the proverbial third wave. I think that the resilience we've shown will carry us through. On the topic of talent, I feel so optimistic there could be a better place, a better time than India. The opportunities, our economy will bounce back faster. The opportunities for talent are huge, and the opportunities for us as organizations to engage them, upskill them is huge. And like I heard my panelists say just before we started, everybody wants to.
I'm going to cut you short.
No, this is everybody wants to talk talent, so there's no better time.
What's your number one on the wish list for that to happen for this?
I think what I said in my previous question, that we work more in partnership, literally for all the players, for representatives of the partnership, that we could achieve, the people around this panel, we could take leaps of progress.
Thanks, Anuradha. Amitabh, over to you. Same question. I won't repeat it.
Sure. So I like Anuradha, I'm extremely optimistic. I think this pandemic has really taught us to sort of be self-sufficient. People have adapted to digital learning in a way which I have not ever seen in my career. I mean, in the last 1 year, internally, we have seen a 7-fold increase. And somewhere I feel, as an attitude, folks have said it's my responsibility to skill myself and equip myself to whatever the demands of my job are. So that's a very good thing to happen. And people have taken responsibility and accountability for their learning. They're investing in it themselves. They're not only looking at the organization doing it for them. In terms of wish list, I would just wish that perhaps our academic system is more vocation oriented. It actually identifies what are the top 3 applications of knowledge which will help apply yourself to the immediate needs of the economy. And we are therefore able to go to institutions and select for skill rather than credentials. That's what I would say as a wish list.
Thanks, Amitabh. Amrita, how about you?
Super optimistic. And I think I'm going to borrow from one of those memes or cartoon strips which came out at the start of COVID, right? Which was that COVID has been the CXO of every company to go through digital transformation. And I think it's been like that for India also. Everything has got digitized when you go around. And I think that's super great and very optimistic that only better things are to come. I think my wish list for this would be a stronger and cleaner partnership between governments and corporates, where we are really looking at identifying some of the things that needs to be worked on and how can a group of corporates and government come together to make that right, be it in the area of education, infrastructure, healthcare, and overall upskilling.
Yeah, great, Amrita. Falgun, how about you?
I think definitely optimistic. There is no doubt about it. And I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of how we are able to take this to a much larger audience, not just in India, but also globally. Very quickly, in terms of my wish list, I think the biggest one would be better frameworks and evangelism, one from the government and second from corporates, to drive this skilling and clarity for the end consumer in terms of, okay, this is what is accepted, this is standardized. And I think that will go a long way in driving this particular revolution. So that will be my number one ask.
Great. Thanks, Falgun and Nupur. I think final comment from you, and then I'll have some of our audience comment.
Thanks, Priyanka. I think I'm very, very optimistic. I think the time is here for everybody to start thinking about diversity as an important topic. When we're talking about talent, I think everybody started recognizing that women form roughly half of the talent pool, and therefore one has to make a conscious effort to bring them in. I'm also optimistic because of the work that we are doing and the kind of action that we are seeing with all the WIMP member firms. And on my wish list, I would just love to see more women in leadership positions. And I would love to see more concerted action in really nurturing that second line of leadership and in sort of nurturing that talent pool all the way to the top.
Great. It's great to have sort of this optimistic note from everyone. We have a few questions coming in. We have one from Kalpana. Kalpana, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question. Yeah, go ahead. Kalpana, go ahead and unmute. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my question is, and the question is to Anuradha, but I would like to hear from the other speakers too, if they have viewpoints on this. Today, we see that there's a difference in maternal and paternal leave policies, which makes it look like that even corporates expect that women will, take on almost the entire workload of bringing up a baby. And obviously, I understand there are only certain tasks that biologically only women can do. But if you look at the others, do you see a trend in the industry that makes it easier for fathers to avail of that paternal leave to spend time with their babies and do their share? And do you see that there are more gender agnostic parental leave policies coming up in the future?
Kalpana, thank you. Thank you for this question. I definitely see a lot of organizations doing some very progressive things to allow for fathers to take paternity leave. Some have gone so far as saying take as much paternity leave as the mother gets for maternity. There's shared parental leave happening in some countries. I've seen organizations in India start to embrace that. But I think as an organization, we have a larger role just beyond policies for maternal and paternal, because I think this notion of flexibility and just the whole conversation that we've heard is that beyond just maternity, there will be different places and times in life when people want that flexibility, whether you're a man or a woman, and for us to create those opportunities. And if I were to just give you the example, Unilever is experimenting with two new models of future work, where one is as an employee, you can cut back on the time and the end that you have with the organization, and we call it you work, and you may choose to scale down and work part-time. And for anything, this could be because of caregiving, it could be for other interests you want to pursue. And this is for our own employees. Equally in HUL, we've just launched what we call Open to You, which is about welcoming gig workers who want to work part-time, who want to work flexi. And again, these are gender neutral. And so I think this whole notion of flexibility and making that gender neutral is an aspect that's very, very important.
Priyanka, is it all right if I add?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So, one thing that I always think about when I think about parental leave is how much emphasis is placed on maternity leave for women and how it starts to sort of almost influence how a woman's career is shaping. And when an organization thinks about parental leave as parental leave, whether it's maternal or parental, there is also an internal signal that the organization is sending to its own employees that a woman is not an outlier, or a woman is not a cost to you because she could be taking maternity leave, because you know what, even a man could be taking paternity leave. And I think internally for the organization's culture, that signal starts to play a big role, over a period of time. And I just wanted to highlight that it is not necessarily about what happens at home. It is also about how it influences how women are perceived at work, and the kind of emphasis managers start to place on hiring or not hiring of women because they could go on leave.
Thanks, Nupur, for sharing that perspective. I will move the conversation along. Shobik, you had a question. If you're here, please go ahead and unmute yourself. Yeah, I think this question was for Amrita. Go ahead, Shobik.
Yeah, thanks all. It's been a fantastic conversation. So first of all, thank you everyone. The question to Amrita, and maybe also Amitav can pitch in. So there's an increasing emphasis on Industry 4.0. Organizations need to maintain a digital workforce and bring in a lot of AI and automation. But as we move along our maturity curve for AI, it also increases the risk of attrition of manual labor or losing out on human resources. So what measures are you taking to maintain this fine balance?
Thanks, Souvik, for that question. And I think always this is top of mind, right? When we talk about digitization, we always feel that there's going to be a job loss, right? So let me give you two data points first, right? One is a more generic global data point, and the second one is from within Airtel, right? And I think first, it was a McKinsey report, I think it was published a while ago, which actually looked at all jobs across and said that for every job, for every job that gets lost, right, or every job lost because of digitization, there is 2.5 jobs that are created, right? Which means that jobs don't actually go away. There are different types of jobs that get added. And therefore, Souvik, to your question that when manual jobs go away, what happens? Because we need fewer people. No, we won't. We will actually need more people, right? Before I explain this further, I'll give a data point from within Airtel around that, right? So in the past year or so, we've added a couple thousand jobs in our digital workforce, but we've not reduced even one from the other part of the organization, right? And therefore, that's another closer home data point on how jobs actually get added, right? So what really happens and what do we do about it so that we don't really end up in people becoming unemployable? I think the entire game and the focus for us has to be on upskilling and reskilling. It's about how do we bring in new skills? How do we make sure that our workforce, which is folks who are within our organizations at present, and our new workforce is getting the right skills? I think that's the main thing to focus on. Again, I can give you a few examples from within the space that I work in on this. So what do we do within Airtel? We are running huge academies. So everybody's heard of 5G, right? 5G, Internet of Things, cloud. So we run academies within Airtel to upskill our workforce on this. People who specifically work on network and technology, they are getting upskilled, but we're also raising the bar for all our thousands of employees on this, right? So that we make sure that people stay ahead of the game. The other thing we're doing on this is that we're going to various institutes, most of the top NITs, NSIT, VJITs, best state colleges. We are going across there, and we are actually running programs every few weeks on topics like 5G, cloud, VoLTE, network security, device ecosystem, all of these topics. And in a short period of time, just within this year, we've covered around 5,000 students on this, and we'll be doing even more, right? There's a need for even greater opportunity to work on. I think I'll give an example of how the Bharti Foundation works on this. We've tied up with IIT Delhi for an Institute of Telecommunication and IIT Mumbai for an Institute of Communications, right? Really to make sure that we are creating the new workforce for the economy, and people are really upskilled. So I think important for all of us as corporates, as people leading this space, to make sure and allay the fears that this will lead to job loss. And also equally important for all of us to focus on upskilling, reskilling our people and the employee base and making them more employable.
Thanks, Amrita, for that very, very, I think, specific and thought-through response. I think there's another question on the same kind of topic. It's anonymous, so I'll read it out. The question is, in the last panel, we discussed the talent war in the tech space. How do we solve that? Will it take decades to change, given it's a supply-side problem? Amrita, you spoke about how you are working on that supply-side problem, both by going to institutes or having, institutes internally. I guess, so maybe the way I would rephrase this question is that, how far are we from solving this challenge at scale? Will our skills get redundant sooner than we are able to upskill them?
I could start on that, and probably then anyone can join in, maybe Falgun, you, right? Yeah, so I think, a couple of years or more than a couple of years ago when we started working, and I was still at Unilever at that point of time, and honestly, you can also step in, when we started working on this entire space and we were researching around skills and skills becoming redundant. At that point of time, the half-life of a skill was 5 years, right? Which means, skills would get redundant even, I'm saying a couple of years ago, which means that everything that I individually would be knowing 2.5 years ago, half of that is irrelevant today, right? That's how fast skills are getting redundant, right? And therefore, the entire game is about being on a continuous learning journey for every one of us, for each and every one of us, right? And that's why I was pointing towards Falgun, right? How do you provide that platform, which we as organizations do, and organizations or platforms like what Falgun has set up really provide that for people to be on this always on continuous learning journey. And that's what we need to create, teach the next generation. And by the way, just like they are born digital natives, I believe they're also born learners, right? We just need to provide the right technology and platforms and ecosystem around them. Falgun, over to you.
Thanks, Amrita. And just to add to what Amrita mentioned, I think there is never going, according to me, there is never going to be a perfect balance of supply and demand of talent and the roles that are there. There's always going to be some imbalance given how these things move. But I think the way to solve for that is to see how we can bridge that gap fast when it exists. And I think there are two things that we can definitely do. The first is awareness of the opportunity for learners, where they're aware that, look, there is a gap, and this is an opportunity for us to upskill and then pursue more exciting careers. So how do we build that mass awareness so that people can start building that skill? And the second is then providing the platform, could be offline, could be online, for them to act on that awareness to build that skill set to pursue more exciting careers. So I think on both of these fronts, I think there is a lot of progress being made. I think at the start of the conversation, for example, Amitabh mentioned that data analytics is a huge skill set, and we've talked about data analytics and data scientist shortage for almost 5 years now. So that was our first course at Upgrad. And even today, we're talking about the same thing. But I think we've come a long way in bridging that gap. It might take another 3 to 4 years to bridge that gap. But I think the bigger problem to solve is create awareness of that opportunity and then provide the infrastructure for people to act on that opportunity to pursue more exciting careers, which I think there is a lot of progress on.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Falgun. We still have a lot more questions coming in. I'll see how many we can take. Trina, I really like the question you have put in. So if you're here, go ahead and unmute yourself. Are you there, Trina? Trina Das. Okay, I'll go ahead and ask the question that she had put in. It's to you, Anuradha. She says, I like the concept of balanced household. Trina, there you are. Please go ahead and ask your question. Go ahead, unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hello, hi everyone. Thanks for the interesting conversation. So, Anuradha, I would like to ask the question to you. So, I really like the concept of balanced household. So, how did you come up with such interesting concept, and what has been your experience in solving for such a deep social problem in terms of the challenges and working with different family stakeholders in general?
Thank you. Thank you, Trina. How did we come up with the notion of a balanced household? It was just my team and I who spent a lot of time brainstorming in the early stages of COVID. And just like we are a company of brands and spend a lot of time connecting with our consumers, we knew that this was an absolutely unfamiliar terrain, and we as people leaders took it upon ourselves to connect far and wide with employees within Unilever, with people, with the workforce at large. And we realized that this whole notion of balanced households was really coming to life when you saw brands starting to make advertisements where the men were washing dishes, and this whole notion of people pitching in to help each other. The other thing, Trina, was that we all realized that we were all in the same storm but different boats. Every person experienced the reality of COVID differently. And therefore, what I could do, the whole thing was about personalization, customization of the employee experience. And therefore, the third was the unit of engagement was not the employee alone, but the family at large. And so when we were talking about health and nutrition, when we were talking about what do you do on a Friday when the whole family is stuck with no opportunities to go out for entertainment, and we realized we had to bring the families in. And this forced us to, think about policies, think about programs. So for example, elder care suddenly became such a big thing in so many employees' lives. And we started to do tie-ups with organizations that would support elder care, because people would come back to offices. But what happens to the people elderly who still need to shield because of COVID? So it went beyond childcare. The third, or the more obvious one, of course, online childcare, entertainment for children. How do we engage families at large? So it was really a thought of deep segmentation. The gender neutral domestic violence policy also came out of this, because we actually had people calling up and complaining. And we knew we had to do something about this, or well-being, employee assistance. So I think it just comes out of deep consumer intimacy, and the consumers in this case are our employees, and then you keep building. I don't think we've solved the problem, but it's certainly a big commitment to get there.
Thanks a lot, Radha. I saw a very different question coming from an IPS officer. Ashish, are you there? Are you there? If you're there, go ahead and unmute yourself. Yeah, Ashish, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for an enlightening discussion. My question relates to women security. So as we see, as I was hearing about that in the discussion as well, that women's security is kind of prerequisite to women employment. And especially from my experience in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, I feel that the women who are moving out to metros for work, the family's primary concern is their security. So what are the ways in which we can further this women's security, and what are the ways in which private sector can collaborate with government?
Shall I take this question, Priyanka? I'm happy to start and then hand over, because a big topic of passion linking to this thing about domestic domestic violence that I spoke about for women is the whole issue of safety for women at the workplace, at home, and in public places. What we did as a sort of an extension of the policy for gender abuse, which was then adopted by many, many organizations, and we were very happy to share, is that we partnered with Clinic Plus, which is our largest penetrated shampoo brand, and said that we will educate 100,000 women under our hashtag Unmute campaign in the space of women's safety at work, women's safety at home, and women's safety in public places. And this Clinic Plus has a whole offering of resources, of helplines, NGOs, where women can have access to. I think the issue that you raise is absolutely critical when we start wanting to bring women into the manufacturing sector. So obvious things like transportation, educating their communities, the panchayats, and working with the governments to make the policies for them to work in night shifts, etc., but then making it safe. Also working with NGOs like Breakthrough in North India. So these are some of the thoughts, and this is a big opportunity for all of us.
Thanks, Anuradha. I don't know if anyone wants to add something quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Amita.
Yeah, I think, it's a good question you raised. And recently we started a couple of factories where we had women working in night shift. And one actually had to work with the local government to convince them that you're equipped to handle the security aspects. So stuff like GPS monitored buses, the last person getting down calls up and confirms that she's been dropped home safely. In locations where we provide housing to managers, we ensure that women are given a preference. We have women specific accommodation. So we have created hostels only for women because they feel more secure and comfortable. Of course, in many of our hotels today, we have dedicated floors for women. So you try and build an ecosystem and an infrastructure which at least not only at the workplace, but also in commuting to work, or if you're in sales, when you go out and work with the customer point and you travel the market, there are folks who, to sort of ensure that you come back on time. If you don't, there is somebody who calls up and checks. You have an access and you are able to reach out to someone, often another lady, in case there is any safety issue. So I think one of the things which we have tried to deal with this is ensure that a person is able to reach out and has access at any point in time if they feel the security is threatened. Governments have also been very supportive. I must say, wherever there are manufacturing units located, they have taken additional measures. They have, in fact, deployed women security forces to ensure that women feel that they're safe when they're coming to work and they're returning.
Thanks, Amitav. I think we are pretty much, at time. I think I'm leaving this discussion with a huge note of optimism, inspired by all of what you shared, and what underpins, some of the themes that I heard that underpins this optimism is, of course, women, more participation of women in the workforce, diversity, the collaborations that we all spoke about between corporates and government. Also, what stayed with me, Amrita, is your optimism that every job that may get displaced is probably getting replaced by 2.5 jobs of a new nature, and the need of the hour is upskilling. And then with startups like what Falgun is running, giving people that platform to be continuous learners. So those are some of the themes I'm taking away. Thanks so much for a very engaged discussion. And it's really been a privilege to be part of this panel. Thanks also to the audience for participating and asking all the questions in your mind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Priyanka.
you.
Breakup, been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All the best.